This is a wonderful morning as we are welcoming Dr. Sudeep Tamar. He is currently working as Professor of Computer Science and Engineering Department at the Institute of Technology, Nirma University, India. Dr. Tamar research interests include blockchain technology, wireless sensor networks, fog computing, smart grid, and IoT. He has authored 2 books and edited 13 books and more than 200 technical papers, including top journals and top conferences such as IEEE, TNSE, TVT, TII, WCM, Networks, ICC, Globecom, and Infocom. Dr. Tamar initiated the research field of blockchain technology adaptation in various verticals in 2017. His research H index is 35, which is outstanding as per the parameters of academic research. Dr. Tamar actively serves his research communities in various roles. He is currently serving the editorial board of Physical Communication, Computer Communication, International Journal of Communication and Systems, and Security and Privacy. He has been awarded Best Research Paper Award from IEEE Globecom 2018, IEEE ICC 2019, and Springer RIC 2019. He has served many international conferences as a member of organizing committee, such as publication chair of FTNCCT 2020, ICCIC 2020, YMOB 2019, member of advisory board of ICACCT 2021, and many more. Dr. Tanwar is a final voting member of IEEE ComSoc Tactile Internet Committee of 2020. He is also senior member of IEEE, CSI, IAENG, ISTE, CSTA, and many other professional bodies, and a member of technical committee of Tactile Internet of IEEE Communication Society. We are very overwhelmed and we are very proud to host Dr. Tawar with this expert talk. Dr. Tawar, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Now, please over to you. We can proceed.
Thank you, Professor Sandeep, for inviting me to share my thought related to recent trends in blockchain technology. And I am really thankful to Lord Buddha Educational Foundation, LBF Nepal, for arranging such webinars in this pandemic time, because we know it very well that in India particularly we are facing a second wave, and this second wave is hitting very badly, disturbing the entire atmosphere, whether it's industry or it's educational sector. But learning, I believe, is an ongoing process, so it never stops. And these webinars are very essential in order to regulate, or I can say in order to disseminate the recent trends. What are the recent trends in the academia? Okay, so once again, thank you very much, Dr. Sandeep. So let me share, before starting my session, let me share one important point with all of you. That is the disclaimer statement. So in this presentation, I have put forward my own thoughts or my own experiences that we are since last 5 years we are facing, or our experiences in our research lab, because I believe that every individual researcher is having a own viewpoint when it comes to visualizing a particular technology, or capturing the outcomes in the form of a research paper or in the form of a project. So content of this presentation I have prepared from various sources like NPTEL, MOOC, or some of the research publications, some books or book chapters. So I want to give the due credit to all the authors, those who have contributed in the area of blockchain technology. And some of the content I have taken from our own published paper, because in the area of blockchain technology, from our research lab, we have contributed more than 50 research papers alone in the area of blockchain technology, framing out the different use cases. So this is about the disclaimer statement. Now, in the next 1.5 hours, maybe we are going to talk about the introductory part of the blockchain, what exactly the meaning of blockchain, and which part the blockchain is going to solve, and what are the myths associated with the blockchain, because people are using these two terms interchangeably, Bitcoin and blockchain. So that part we are going to take. So I have divided this entire session into three parts. So in the first part, we are going to discuss about the introductory, or we can say the nut and bolts of the blockchain technology, by taking some of the realistic examples, by some tutorial we are going to take in this particular part. So ultimate objective of part one is to aware you people about what exactly the meaning of blockchain technology and what are the different terminologies when it comes to defining the blockchain technology, what are the different kinds of terminologies are there in the blockchain technology. And with respect to part one, we are going to take one implementation also, because I believe that if we are going to discuss all the theoretical stuff, then it is going to be a bore for all the audience. So for them, I have kept for each part, I have kept one implementation. So after part one, maybe after the PPT part one, part two, or part three, we are going to take the implementation all together. But one implementation we are going to take from the part one, that is related to the implementation of blockchain. When you want to create or you want to implement your own blockchain, that's the dummy blockchain. So how you are going to create the blockchain, and if you want to visualize it graphically, then how you can visualize it. So two aspects of implementation we are going to discuss here. One is the purely the coding part, and second one is the GUI based interface. Okay, then in the part two of my session, we are going to discuss about what is the role of consensus protocol, what exactly the meaning of consensus in the blockchain technology. And in the blockchain, we are having basically three environment: public, private, and permission. But I restrict myself with respect to the discussing the consensus protocol only. We are going to discuss with respect to the permissionless environment, when my environment is public environment, not the permission environment or private environment, because environment also plays a very important role when it comes to adopting the blockchain in the different verticals, because depending upon the environment, there are different class of consensus protocol. It is not like that whatever consensus protocol you are having for permissionless environment, same is applicable for the permission environment or consortium environment. So that we will discuss in part two. And in the part three, we are after part two, we are going to take one implementation related to part two, that is how you are going to implement proof of work, which is one of the consensus protocol under the umbrella of the permissionless environment. And in the part three of this session, we are going to discuss about what is the basically the potential application area, because this is very important, I believe, for all of you, that if you are inclined towards working in the area of blockchain technology, then the next step is how you are going to implement it and what application you are going to select. So this part we are going to discuss in part three. So now, because we belongs to the academic community, so everyone is having this kind of philosophy that why this webinar is so important for us, and like in the normal academic process, what are the learning objectives of a particular course. So in line to that, I have prepared one PPT, so that as a speaker, it's my duty to give you a kind of a feeling that what are the learning objectives of this particular talk. So I believe that after this talk, you will be aware about what are the nuts and bolts of blockchain technology, and what is the taxonomy of consensus protocol, and why there is a requirement of consensus protocol, particularly for the permission environment, and what are the different tools and techniques to develop a new consensus protocol. This is the third learning objective. And fourth and important learning objective after this talk, maybe some of you are inclined towards working in the area of blockchain technology. And for them, how you are going to select a use case, what definition you are going to select, which application you want to target. So this is again the final learning objective. So these all four are the basically the learning objective of this session, entire session. So just to start the first part of the session, that is introduction to blockchain technology. So now before directly jumping to the blockchain technology, let me first set the stage for the blockchain technology, that what exactly the blockchain, what kind of problem exactly the blockchain is going to solve. So that first, prior to discuss the problem, let me spare some time on some traditional way of document sharing. So I'm not talking about in the era of 2021. I am talking about in the era of 80s or 90s. Let's say me and Dr. Sandeep, we want to share one document. In the era of 80s and 90s, I am talking. So one of the easiest way is Dr. Sandeep has drafted an email and make a kind of attachment of the Word document and send it to me. And at my end, I just download that particular document and just read out. And Dr. Sandeep has requested, please, Dr. Sandeep, please proofread it and send it back to me. So I just proofread the entire document, and wherever I feel that there is a there is a requirement to change the content and the layout, I did exactly the same, and again send this document back to Dr. Sandeep. So this is the traditional way of document sharing in the era of 80s or 90s. Okay, and other mode are also there, but we are discussing only one of the modes basically. So other modes are like floppy disk are also there. So that we are not going to discuss, but one of the traditional way of document sharing is sharing the document. Let's say for Microsoft document, two friends are there, they want to communicate with each other, but the drawback of this particular traditional way of document sharing is both the user cannot simultaneously update the document at the same time. I'm not talking in the era of 2021. I'm talking on the era of 1980s or 90s basically. So this is the lacuna in the traditional way of document sharing, where both the user cannot simultaneously update the document. So whatever changes I'm going to make, unless and until I send the document back to Dr. Sandeep, then only Dr. Sandeep will came to know that what changes I have made to this particular document. Otherwise, he is not in a position to visualize what changes I have made to the document unless and until he received a reply to his email, and that email contains the attachment of the revised document basically. So this is the traditional way of document sharing. Now, in this particular traditional way of document sharing, we faced one problem. That problem is very genuine problem. Simultaneously, at the same time, what changes I have made to a particular document simultaneously at the same time, Dr. Sandeep is not in a position to visualize. Okay, so this is one of the drawbacks that we will continue. Now, if you talk about in the present era, so in the present era, let's say there is a class of computer network, and in a class there are, I just take an example, 60 students are there. So the concerned faculty want to take, let's say, want to collect some of the crucial information and important information like the name of the student or the roll number or the other detail like mobile number or the address. So he just prepared a Excel sheet and share with all the student, class of 60 students, and at the same time faculty can also visualize that how many students have already filled the data and how many have not filled the data. So in this particular way of document sharing, that we can call it as a Google Docs basically, it's very popular nowadays, where simultaneously multiple user can log into the system and can perform the editing as per the rights given to them. Okay, and but believe me, this is one of the traditional way of document sharing. We have rectified one of the problems that so far we have discussed in the last PPT, but according to me, this is not a foolproof system. This is not a secure system. This system doesn't contain or work on the privacy part. So why? Because if you take an example, I'm talking with respect to the storage only. If you take an example of access capability, then it's a decentralized system, but I am taking with a perspective of storage. So this Google Docs is still using the centralized approach as far as the data storage is going to concern. Now, the next question comes that whether there is a problem if we are using centralized approach for the data storage. There is a big question mark on the credibility that if we are using the centralized approach for the data storage, then what is the harm? What is the problems, or we can say what are the different kind of problems associated with using the centralized way of data storage? And forget about, if I add one more complexity to my previous question, forget about editing the document. This particular gentleman is not even though in a position to open the document shared by his friend, okay, because of the network connectivity, because bandwidth is a problem at his end. So forget about editing the document, but still it happens practically in a realistic aspects also, that sometimes we are not in a position to open the document shared by one of our friend using the Google Docs medium. But why? Because if bandwidth is a problem for us, then you cannot upload or work on the shared sheet shared by your friend. So this is one of the another way of traditional way of document sharing, but it uses centralized approach as far as the data storage capabilities are going to concern, not the access capability, data storage capability I am talking about. Now the next question comes that does this way of document sharing or using the centralized approach is a problem? Yes. What are those problems? So problem number one, in case of centralized approach, you know it very well, there is a single point of failure, because instead of having multiple point of contact, in case of centralized approach, we are having single point of contact. So if we are having single point of contact in our system, that means the resilience is more basically if we are dependent on a single entity. Okay, so what happen if, let's say, if you do not have sufficient bandwidth to load the Google Docs shared by your friend, then you will not be able to perform editing on that particular document which was shared by one of your friend. And the worst part is associated with the centralized systems are, if what happen if the server crashes, then you are not in a position to recover your document because you are having single point of contact instead of having multiple point of contact as there in the case of the decentralized environment. Okay, so these are some of the problem associated with the centralized approach. So we have started, I just go back, we have started with this way of document sharing. This is not fruitful because simultaneously both the user cannot update the document. Now in this particular case, one of the problem is rectified, that both the users simultaneously update the document, but this way of storing the data is using the centralized way of storing the data. So now centralized approach is having these disadvantages, or these problems are associated with the centralized approach because they are having single point of contact. So now what could be the viable solution for sharing a particular document if the centralized approach is not right candidate for, or right approach for storing or the entire data, then what could be the viable solution? So before directly discussing about the viable solution, because in my subsequent discussion I am going to discuss about these two terminologies more interchangeably. So let me give you a brief introduction about these three terminologies. First thing, I have already given you the entire gist about the centralized system. So in case of centralized system, we are having single point of contact. All the nodes, all the user in the network are connected with this with this centralized system, or we can say a single point of contact. But in case of decentralized system, if you compare it with the centralized system, where we are having single point of contact, but in case of decentralized system, instead of having the single point of contact, we are having multiple point of contact. Now, what advantages we are going to achieve if we are comparing the decentralized system with the centralized system, or I can say if we are having multiple point of contact in our network. Let's say I have just taken example, because of some crash fault or because of some failure, because of some network issue, you are not getting connectivity from this segment. If you see my cursor, from this segment, you are not getting any kind of response. Okay, so now need not to worry, your performance of your entire network is not any problem. Why? Because you have other point of contact from where you are getting the, or the central control, or we can say the base station, or we can say the access point is getting the data from at a regular interval of time. So in this particular case, instead of having single point of contact, we are having multiple point of coordination in the decentralized system. This is nothing but the way of representing the, or way of representing the nodes basically, and this way we can call it as a blockchain basically. Now come to the distributed. So in case of distributed, every node every individual node or every individual user is connected with all the remaining nodes. This way we can call it as a peer-to-peer way basically. So here every node individually executing his own job basically, and there is no central controller like we are having in case of centralized system. So everyone is connected. Let's say, for example, this particular node is connected to all the remaining nodes that are available in the network. So this way of representation, we can call it as a peer-to-peer representation basically. If you take an example, your internet, intranet, and World Wide Web or email, all these are working on the principle of distributed mechanism. So I am going to discuss more about the decentralized and distributed. I'm not going to discuss about the centralized approach. Okay, so that's the way I have kept this slide to make you aware about, although many of you are already aware about what exactly the meaning of decentralized and distributed system. Now moving further, I again come back to my previous question where I have one document and I want to share one document with one of my friend. Google Docs is using centralized approach for the data storage. Then what could be the viable solution? So according, if you refer the literature, so in the literature, researchers have maintained or notified it to the community to the across the globe that all these users are connected with the internet basically. Okay, so let's say for example, everyone can edit on their local copy of the document, and we make the internet responsible in order to maintain the information consistency throughout your network. So let me clear this particular meaning basically. What is the meaning of information consistency here? So information consistency plays a very important role for the entire performance of any network. Why? Because if let's say I have transferred certain amount from my account to Dr. Sandeep account, then my account is going to be debited and Dr. Sandeep account is going to be credited. So this is a kind of a one entry, and believe me, in banking system we are having more than thousands or sometime thousands of entries we are having, or hundreds of entry we are having. So every time your ledger is going to be updated and refreshed. So that's the way it create a kind of a trust among all the stakeholders. Those are the part of your network. So according to this solution, if I make internet itself responsible in order to maintain the information consistency in your network, then according to me, or the if you refer the literature, this is again not a viable solution. Why? Because you know it very well that internet is an open channel. So if internet is an open channel, that means it gives an invitation to the intruder, hey, come and perform some kind of malicious activity on the data stored, on the data available to the entire network. So this means that now the next step comes, what kind of security policies you are having, what kind of access control mechanisms you are having, whether you are having iris based access control mechanism or password based access control mechanism or digital signature based access control mechanism. Okay, so now this is not a viable solution. This can be one of the solution but not a viable solution basically, if we make internet itself responsible in order to maintain the information consistency. Because internet is an open channel, so we cannot believe directly, or we cannot say this is a viable solution. This is only one of the possible solution. Now still, answer to my question is not, we have not discussed the answer of our previous question. Still we are on the same question that we have one document and we want to share that document from other friend or a group of people. So now, if we take an example, let's say all the nodes or all the user, those are the part of the network, are connected in such a way, and that connection we can call it as a peer-to-peer way, where every individual node or every individual user is connected with all the remaining nodes or all the remaining users. Those are the part of the network. So in this way, we are not going to replace the internet, because we need the connectivity throughout the entire network or between the different individuals, because they want to communicate with each other, whether they want to use message passing structure or they want to use the other way of communication that is entirely dependent on the working capability of the network. But this is again a possible solution where a decentralized database is maintained, and that decentralized database is having the strong consistency support. What is the meaning of strong consistency support? That means whatever changes made at the end of individual user, those changes are going to be reflected in the ledger maintained by each and every individual. Okay, so this is nothing but a way of representation, and this way of representation or framing out the network is called the blockchain technology basically. So blockchain is, I again repeat, blockchain is not going to replace the centralized systems, because for some of the applications there is no requirement to go for the blockchain based solution, because there are some issues like scalability or the cost factor that we are going to discuss at the later part of my session. But for some of the requirement, the centralized systems are performing or giving the optimum solution or giving the right solution. So it's an basically add-on to the centralized system. So I'm just taking an example to validate my statement. Let's say if you take an example of healthcare sector. So in the healthcare sector, we have, I've just taken an example, you have two category of patient. One is the critical patient and second one is the normal patient. So critical patient means what? Delay is more important for the critical patient. If there is some kind of delay in the diagnose, then it is directly proportional to the death of a particular patient. So for critical ill patient, we need to fetch the query from the system, or we need a particular system which will give us the response within minimized delay basically, or minimum delay. So for those applications, for this segment of the healthcare where delay is more important, we can go for the decentralized approach. But for the rest of the normal user, we can go with the centralized approach. Okay. So this is again one of the possible solution where blockchain is basically a kind of a decentralized database which contain a kind of a, or which provide a kind of a strong consistency support. Now moving further, so what exactly the definition, or we can say the scientific definition of blockchain? Forget about what is mentioned in the slide. I will take a very simple example. Let's say in a class of 60 students, okay, and out of these 60 students, any 4 students, they do not want to take part in any of the placement activity. They do not want to appear in the GRE. They do not want to pursue MS. Why? Reason is very simple. They want to become entrepreneur and they want to start their own venture, their own company basically. Okay. Now, what is the problem? Problem number one, they are not the problem. The best part is they are technically competent. All the 4 students are technically competent. Now, what is the problem? Problem number one, they do not have trust on each other. And believe me, if group of 4 person want to start a company and they do not have trust on each other, then the lifetime or the success of that particular organization is on, there is a big question mark on the success and the lifespan also. Why? Because the trust is a foremost and important parameter for all these business applications. So now they need a kind of a technology which will help them in order to maintain the trust. So this is nothing but a decentralized database is going to help them in order to maintain the trust that we will discuss with the help of one tutorial. Now come back to the scientific definition of blockchain. So blockchain is a decentralized computation and information sharing platform. For what purpose we need this platform? Because this platform enables the multiple stakeholders. Like if you take an example of healthcare, we are having doctors, nurses, paramedical staff, patient, different categories of doctors, different categories of patient, different categories of clinician staff, okay, and admin staff also. Okay, so diversity is more in any of the application. So this decentralized, we can say the decentralized sharing platform enables the multiple stakeholders who do not have trust on each other, but still they want to cooperate, they want to collaborate, they want to coordinate. For what purpose? Because they want to take part in the rational decision making process. If I take an example, what is the example in our case? They want to start their own startup or they want to start their own venture. If I take an example of the 4 students, Okay, so now we take one tutorial, and through this tutorial we are going to see, going to visualize that how the trust is going to be maintained in the blockchain technology, and why we call this blockchain technology as a distributed ledger technology, or the DLT in short. Okay, so now let's say we just take one example. Initially, in in this particular network, we are having four person X, person Y, person P, and person Z. We are having only four-person in this particular network. Okay, so and initially all these person having $100 in their account. Okay, so that means initial balance of all the four-person is $100. Okay, and they are connected with each other in using the decentralized database with a strong consistency support in a peer-to-peer manner. They are connected with each other. Okay, so now let's say, for example, if I want to transfer, just I have taken one example, I want to transfer 50,000 rupees from my account to Dr. Sandeep account. So what is the modality I'm going to use? Right now I'm having multiple options available. I can go with the UPI, or I can go with the Google Pay, I can go with the Paytm. Or if I take a very simple example, let's say I have account in Punjab National Bank and Dr. Sandeep is having, I'll just take an example, State Bank of India. Okay, so now different banks altogether. Now I just added the account of Dr. Sandeep, and then after adding the account, maybe after 2 hours, I am entitled to transfer the amount. So I have transferred the amount from my account to Dr. Sandeep account, but the success of that particular transaction is dependent on the payment gateway services. I again repeat, payment gateway services used by my bank and Dr. Sandeep Bank. So that means your success of that transaction, that I have transferred $50 from my account to Dr. Sandeep account, is dependent on the third party, and that third party for the financial institution is the payment gateway. Okay, so now in the normal banking process, we need to rely on the third party payment gateway. And believe me, if there is a big question mark on the integrity of the payment gateway, then your entire transaction is in a trouble. And sometime in a realistic environment, it happens many times that I have transferred amount from my account to Dr. Sandeep account, but amount is debited from my account and not credited to the Dr. Sandeep's account. So this happened practically. Then after 3 to 4 days, money automatically credited to my account, or sometime we need to lodge a particular complaint, and then bank will inquire, and then the required amount is credited to my account. Okay, so in nutshell, what I want to communicate with you people, that in normal banking process or in normal practices, as far as the data storage is going to concern, we have to rely on the third party services. Okay, but now come back to this particular example where we have considered four-person, person X, person Y, person P, person Z. So now let's say, for example, if person X want to transfer $50 from her account to person Y account. Okay, so now this is a kind of a transaction between X and Y. Okay, like if I transferred $50,000 from my account to Dr. Sandeep's account, then my account is debited, Dr. Sandeep's account is credited. And in a particular bank, if there are, let's say, 1,000 customers, this transaction has nothing to do with these 1,000 customers, because it's an end-to-end transaction between me and Dr. Sandeep. So with the passbook mechanism, we can know that we can visualize that 50,000 debited from my account and 50,000 credited to Dr. Sandeep's account. Now, if you take an example here, although this is a kind of a transaction that X has transferred $50 from her account to person Y account, but this transaction is to be captured by in the form of a ledger, and this ledger we can call it as a distributed ledger. Every individual node or every user who is the part of the network is having the copy of this distributed ledger. Okay, that's the way this blockchain technology is called the distributed ledger technology. Now, what is the purpose of maintaining this distributed ledger? If it is a kind of a transaction between X to Y, X has transferred $50 to Y, why this is going to be reflected in the ledger maintained by P and Z? Why? Because later on, if Y can deny that I have not received $50 from X, then this ledger is going to be refreshed, and this ledger is going to be referred in case of any problem. So that is basically the main step for maintaining the trust among the stakeholders, that at every instant of time, any of the user or any of the node can visualize that what is going on in the network at any instant of time. The information is not hiding basically. So the blockchain provide a kind of a transparency to all the users, that what kind of transaction, how many transactions are already committed, who has transferred how much amount to whom, and what is the status of the entire network at any instant of time. Let's say I initiate another transaction where person Y has transferred $30 from his account to person P account. So although this is a kind of a transaction between Y to P, but this is going to be reflected in the ledger maintained by X and Y, X and Z also. So X to P, $30. So that's the way. This is the beauty of the blockchain technology, that every information needs to be captured in the ledger, and that copy of the ledger is refreshed after the every transaction is committed, and every individual is having the refreshed copy of the entire ledger basically. So in this particular example, have you analyzed any involvement of the third party? There is a big no. There is no involvement of the third party. All these transactions are end-to-end transactions. Okay, if let's say for example, if person X want to initiate another transaction, person X want to transfer $80 from her account to person Z account, so she has already transferred $50 from her account, and right now she is having only $50 balance in her account, so she is entitled only to initiate a transaction up to $50. Okay, so this particular transaction, if she initiate $80, is an invalid transaction. It is not a valid transaction. Why? Because due to insufficient funds. So this also happen in the normal banking procedure. Whatever amount we are having in our account, so only that much amount we are entitled to transfer to other friend if we want to transfer. Okay, so in this particular example, have you analyzed any involvement of the third party? Like in the normal banking process, we are having payment gateway services. There is a big no. So now, what is the problem with the governments? Why the government of India? I don't know about the government of Nepal. Why they have not adopted or go for the adoption of the blockchain in the financial system? Because only concern lie with the government of India. I know it very well that who will be the regulatory? Who is going to maintain or act as a regulatory, that what is going on in the network, and who is going to act as a regulatory and monitor all these transactions? Because in the Bitcoin based network, if you take an example, which is a public network where anyone can join the network at any instant of time, and based upon their requirement, you can perform the intended task, and at any instant of time, we cannot visualize that this particular transaction is between Sandeep and Sudeep. We cannot visualize. So because all the users in the blockchain are known by the hash basically. Okay, that's the way this blockchain technology is going to maintain the privacy, not only to the security, but also the privacy of the individuals, privacy of the users. Those are the part of the network. Okay, now moving further. So in this particular case, I will tell you the transaction life cycle of the blockchain. I am going to highlight now what is the transaction life cycle of the blockchain. What is the meaning of transaction life cycle? How the transaction is initiated, and before the transaction is committed, what are the different phases through which this transaction passed? So that we are going to discuss in this particular PPT. So let's say, for example, with respect to Bitcoin public network, I am going to explain it. Let's say in your network, there are 50 nodes are available, or 50 users are there in your network. So out of these 50 nodes, let's say someone having some kind of transaction that he or she want to commit. Okay, so someone requests a transaction. What is the meaning of that? Let's say I am having some data that I want to store into the blockchain, or with respect to Bitcoin, if I'm taking an example, I have some Bitcoin that I want to transfer to one of my friends. So it is a kind of a request. So someone requested a transaction, any of the user, valid user of your network. So now the requested transaction is broadcasted to the entire network in a peer-to-peer manner, because all the users, all the nodes are connected in a peer-to-peer manner. This is the beauty of the blockchain, that every node is connected to all the remaining nodes. Okay, and now the next question comes that whether how will the network came to know that whether the transaction is coming from the valid user or not, or from the authorized user or not. So for to check this in blockchain technology, we are having the validation process. Okay, so we need to validate that whether the transaction requested by the valid user who is the part of the network or not. So for this we need to do a kind of a validation. So this part we are going to discuss in the subsequent part when I'm going to implement the blockchain. Then I try to correlate all these theoretical stuff that we are going to discuss right now, or then the validation comes into the picture, where the network of nodes validate the transactions, that the transaction is coming from the valid user. Then this verified transaction can involve a kind of a cryptocurrency, if we take an example of the cryptocurrency, or if we take an example of the data. Then once the transaction is verified that it is coming from the authorized user or the valid user, then the transaction is combined with the other transaction to create a new block of data for the ledger. So hierarchy of the blockchain is like that. We are having blockchain. Inside the blockchain, we are having multiple blocks, and inside the blocks, we are having multiple transactions. Okay. So hierarchy is like that. We are having separate hash for the block. We can call it as a block ID, and then we are having separate hash for the each transaction that is there inside the blocks basically. Okay, so now this new transaction or this new block which contains a new transaction requested by one of the user is added into the existing blockchain. In this way, this particular transaction is permanent and unalterable. I will come back to these two keywords again. So now this transaction is added into the existing blockchain, and this information is conveyed to the user who has requested the transaction through the email or the mobile app or whatever medium they want to use. So this is the transaction life cycle of the blockchain. In a very abstract way, we discussed it. So now I come back to these two keywords, permanent and unalterable. What is the meaning of these two keywords? The meaning is very simple. Once the transactions are committed or occurred inside the network, okay, so no user will have any right to modify the existing transaction. So user cannot modify already committed transactions. That's the way. This is the beauty of the blockchain, that any already committed transaction cannot be altered by any of the users. Okay, so this is the beauty of the blockchain. So now I will tell you why this statement is so important, and what are the reasons why every transaction that is there inside the blockchain, no one can have the right to modify that particular already committed transaction. Why? Now in the next slide I need to justify it, that because in the blockchain, you know it very well that blockchain is a kind of a container data structure basically. So those who love the concept of data structure, like because blockchain is using some of the concept of data structure also, like linked list. So when we discuss the implementation, then I come back to why I have quoted this particular statement here, that the blockchain is somehow related with the or following the concept of the linked list. So now whatever transactions are there inside the blockchain, so all the transactions are organized using the concept of the Merkle tree representation basically. So Merkle tree root is basically used in order to arrange all the transactions that are committed inside the blockchain. Okay, so Merkle tree representation is used. So the root of the Merkle tree is used for the verification of all the transactions basically. So on the right hand side, if you see there is one tree, and that tree we can call it as a Merkle tree. And this T1, T2, T3, T4, all these are the transactions that are already committed transactions. Those are already available inside the blockchain. So like transaction T1, T2, T3, T4. I'm just taking an example of 50 Bitcoin, 20 Bitcoin, 30 Bitcoin, or 100 Bitcoin. I'm just taking an example. All these transactions are already there inside the blockchain. Now, how can I say that no one have the right to modify all these transactions, or out of these transactions any of the transaction? Let's say for example, if the intention from the attacker perspective, if I think, let's say the attacker perspective is like that, attacker want to modify the transaction T2, the already committed transaction T2. Okay, attacker want to modify this particular transaction. Now I have already told you that blockchain is using the basic cryptographic primitives like SHA, double SHA 256 in order to generate the hash basically. Why? Because here the users are known by not known by their name. The users are known by the hash basically. So hash is going to be generated by using SHA-256 basic cryptographic primitives. We are going to use for that. So double SHA-256 we are going to use in order to generate the hash, that we are going to discuss also when we are going to discuss about the implementation. So I come back to my question from the attacker perspective. If you think that we want to modify any already committed transaction T2, let's say you attacker want to modify already committed transaction T2. So what is the transaction T2? If I take an example that someone has transferred $30. So this transaction T2 contains $30 and attacker want to modify it to $50. Okay. So now every transaction I have already told you contains some kind of hash encapsulated inside the hash, because at any instant of time no one can reveal that this transaction is between Sandeep and Sudeep. This transaction is between, because we are also known by the hash basically. Okay, every individual is known by the hash and every transaction is known by the hash. So no one can visualize because you know it very well. This is the basic philosophy of the cryptography and network security, like the concept of hashing. You will give a variable length of message and you will get a fixed length of message digest. Okay. So if you get a fixed length of message digest and you know the fixed length of message digest, that means the hash, you cannot backtrack or you cannot find out the hash basically. Okay. So let's say for example, this is the hash of the transaction T2. This I just for the representation purpose I have used H01 is the hash of this particular transaction T2. Okay, so now this hash generates the hash of the basically the upper node, that is the L1 basically leaf node. So H0 is the hash of the leaf node, which constitute the hash of transaction T1 and T2. Transaction T1 hash is H00, transaction T2 hash is H01. Now this is interlinked with the root hash. So root hash constitute what? Root hash constitute the hash of L1 and hash of this particular H1 basically. Okay. So in this way we can say that if I am going to change, if attacker want to change any of the already committed transaction like T2, then the hash H01 is going to be changed. If hash H01 is going to be changed, then this H1 H0 L1 hash is going to be changed. Why? Because L1 hash is going to be constituted or take care the hash of H01. If this H01 is going to be changed, then directly hash of L1 is going to be changed. If hash of leaf node 1 is going to be changed, then directly the hash of the root is going to be changed. So that's the way tampering of data in the blockchain is not feasible practically, I can say. Impossible I can say, but there are a couple of chances where attacker have gained the access to the network and they have computed the nonce value very faster, because they have high performance computing devices or GPUs available. There they have computed the or solved the difficulty very fast as compared to the total collective work carried out by the miners. So that's the way we can say that slowly this technology is maturing. But in nutshell, we can say that tampering of already available transaction inside the blockchain is in next to impossible. But if you invest high performance computing devices, then you can also visualize that this is not a big deal if you invest high performance computing devices or the or GPU processing capabilities. Okay. So now, if I continue my previous discussion where I have quoted that you cannot modify already committed transactions that are there inside the blockchain. So now let me take one example, and through this one example, I'm going to tell you why the tampering of data is not feasible in the blockchain. One example I have already taken, that is with respect to the Bitcoin, that uses basically the Merkle tree kind of representation. Now, if I take an example from a layman, if I want to discuss this, why the tampering of data is not possible in the blockchain, if I take an example of Bitcoin, let's say everyone in the network is working for adding the block number 91. So what exactly the meaning of this particular statement? It means that starting from the first block, or first block of the blockchain, or the zeroth block of the blockchain, we can call it as a Genesis block, which indicates the starting of the blockchain. So now, starting from the zeroth block up to block number 90, all the blocks are added into the existing blockchain, and everyone in the network is working for adding the block number 91. I again repeat, start from the first block up to block number 90. All the blocks are already added into the existing blockchain, and everyone in the network is working for mining the block number or adding the block number 91. But one of the miner intention is not right. If I take an example, any of the miner want to modify any of the already committed transaction. Let's say any of the miner want to modify, and that miner is basically the attacker or adversary, want to modify any of the already committed transactions that is there inside the block number 74, and everyone is working for adding the block number 91, and one of the miner who is an attacker basically want to modify the transaction that is there inside the block number 74. So now, why this is not possible, or we can say it's next to impossible? Because for adding the block number 91, there is some timestamp associated, because mining procedure we need to start. The mining algorithm is going to be started for adding the block number 91. If I'm just take an example, 20 seconds, or I take an example, 50 seconds are allocated for adding the block number 91. So within this 50 second, the miner whose intention is not right, who want to modify any of the already committed transaction that is there inside the block number 74, that miner will do all kind of modification within the time slot allocated for adding the block number 91. And apart from that, we have already noticed that blockchain is using the concept of the Merkle tree kind of representation, where every node is interlinked with each other. If you are going to change this particular transaction, then this is going to be changed, root node is going to be changed. If root is going to be changed, this is also going to be changed, this is also going to be changed. That means the entire hash is going to be changed. So that means up to block number 74, starting from block number 74 up to block number 90, attacker has to do all kind of computations and redo all the changes and change the hash basically starting from block number 74 to 90. Okay, so that means the attacker has to perform 18 blocks of expensive computing, basically 18 blocks of expensive computation the attacker has to perform, which is next to impossible. And that too, within 50 seconds the attacker need to perform this also, change this also, and change the hash of block number 74 to 90 also. And one more complexity is within the 50 seconds, because this time is allocated for adding the block number 91. So this is the way we can say the tampering of the data is next to impossible in the blockchain. But yes, if you just Google it, you will also find a couple of use cases where there are some instances where attacker have gained the access to the entire network and do some kind of injection of the wrong data and modify the already available transaction. Yes, there are plenty of use cases, but slowly this technology is maturing now, and there is less scope available for tampering the data now. Okay, now moving further, there are three types of nodes basically in the blockchain network. First one is the miner node. Remember when we have discussed the life cycle of the blockchain, this particular PPT, I again come back to that PPT because so that you can also visualize. Just a minute. Yeah, this one. So in this particular case, we have not discussed about who is going to validate or who is going to verify the transaction. So now that part we are going to discuss. So in case of blockchain, we are having three types of node. The first one is the miner node. So what is the responsibility of the miner node? So miner node is responsible for authentication, authorization, and auditing all the transactions that are going to be occurred or occurring in the network. So it is the duty of the miner node. Then next category of node, we are having the ledger node. So ledger nodes are used basically to store the history of all the transaction. Why? Because this history is very important at any instant of time. In case of any problem, this ledger is going to be referred in order to resolve the conflict and take the final decision. And third category of node in the blockchain, we are having the normal node. So because this normal node contains the full copy of the complete blockchain. So these are the types of the blockchain nodes we are having. Now, according to me, what is the definition of blockchain? You do not need to remember the exact word-to-word definition of the blockchain. You need to remember only the keywords, and there are the basically the 5 keywords associated with the formal definition of blockchain. So blockchain is a kind of a basically distributed ledger which is open for all. Open. Why it is open? Because it is accessible to all the users. There is no question of monopoly at all. Distributed or decentralized. Why? Because it cannot be captured at any instant of time by a group of user, or a single-handedly cannot be captured by a single user or a group of user. Cannot control the entire network. Efficient. Why? Because any number of blocks can be added, any number of transactions can be added. So that's the way we can say it's efficient and scalable. Verifiable. Why? Because at any instant of time, anyone can check that what is going on in the network, and everyone can check the validity of the information. That's the way it is called verifiable. And permanent, we have already noticed that because once the transactions are committed, no one have the right to modify already committed transactions. So that's the way this is permanent. So these are the some of the keywords associated with the formal definition of the blockchain according to my perspective. Now we take this particular slide, and then we move to the part number 2 of our session, and after that we are going to start the implementation. So there are three category of basically three types of blockchains. First one is the public blockchain. If you refer the literature, we can also call the public blockchain as the permissionless blockchain, and second one is the private blockchain, or we can also call it as a permissioned blockchain, and third one is the federated or consortium blockchain. I will take a very simple example. Let's say LBF group of institution. So LBF across the Nepal is having, let's say I'm just taking an example, I am not aware about it, 7 campuses LBF is having across the Nepal. So, and LBF want to eliminate this manual data sharing process, and they want to have a kind of a decentralized data storage process, not only in the data storage, but in the financial aspects also, in the financial part also. So for that, they are looking for a decentralized solution where the person sitting at Kathmandu in a head office, they can also monitor that what kind of fees are collected, and what about the different kinds of documents, what about the modalities are there. So means they can visualize with the help of it's not an ERP system, it's a decentralized system basically. So now in this particular case, they can go with a federated or consortium blockchain, because there are a group of companies basically. For public blockchain, if your data is not critical or your data is not so important, then you can go with the public blockchain also, like Bitcoin based of network using the public blockchain. And private blockchain, like IBM or Microsoft, they have their own private blockchain where they are restricting only, give the access to only the employees that belongs to that particular organization. So if you take an example of transaction speed, this is very important parameter for comparing these types of blockchain. What is the meaning of transaction speed? It means that what is the transaction settlement ratio? uh, how many transactions are settled per unit time. Let's say if you want to plot a graph mathematically, you want to visualize that if the number of transaction increases, then what will be the impact on the transaction settlement ratio, and what will be the impact on the entire performance of your network. If you want to visualize it, then for them this transaction speed is a most important parameter. So in public blockchain, because anyone at any instant of time can join the network at any instant of time without proving any identity basically in case of the public blockchain based network, which we can also call it as a permissionless blockchain. That's the way the transaction speed settlement is slow. And in case of private and federated blockchain, only specific users are entitled, so that it's lighter and faster as compared to the public blockchain. If you take an example, I have kept only few examples here. The list is very long. Bitcoin and Ethereum, these are the example of public blockchain or permissionless blockchain. And Hyperledger, or all the variants of Hyperledger, Hyperledger Indy, Hyperledger Iroha, Hyperledger Sawtooth, Hyperledger Fabric, or Hyperledger Consortium. All these are example of the private blockchain, or which we can also call it as a permission blockchain. And this Quorum and Corda, these are the example of the federated or consortium blockchain. So now this is the end of part one of my presentation, where we have discussed about we have discussed about some of the nut and bolts associated with the blockchain technology. Now, before directly moving to the implementation part, let me wind up it in the next 20 to 30 minutes, and then we will take the implementation. Two implementation we are going to discuss. One is the how you are going to implement the blockchain, dummy blockchain, and how you are going to implement the proof of work. So now, in the next part, we are going to discuss about the consensus protocols. First question, why there is a requirement of consensus in the blockchain, or in general, forget about the blockchain, what is the meaning of consensus? So I will tell you a very simple example. Let's say in your family, if you are having 4 person in your family, brother, mother, sister, and father, okay, and you have to decide that for today's dinner, where you want to go. So your brother say we need to go to Nepali restaurant, your mother say we need to go to Chinese restaurant, and your father say we need to go to Gujarati restaurant, and your sister say we need to go to North Indian restaurant. Okay, so all 4 person in a single family having 4 different opinions, and they need to decide that where they want to go for today's dinner. So so in this particular case, it is very, very typical to take the final decision call that for today's dinner, what will be the final venue. I'm not talking about in terms of the the another aspect, like in the normal Indian family, whatever is decision taken by the father or mother, we have to blindly follow it. So we are not considering this aspect, but I am considering from a technological perspective. So in a family, if you are having multiple decision maker, then there is a problem. And if all 3 persons say that whatever decision is taken by our father and we are blindly follow, so in normal circumstances, in the application or in the scenario where you are having only one decision maker, who is going to take the decision that which transaction is going to be added into the blockchain or not. So for these scenario, we don't need any kind of consensus. There is no requirement of consensus when you have only one decision maker. Now, if you are having multiple decision maker in your scenario, like in the family we have considered, where we have 4 different opinion, South Indian restaurant, North Indian restaurant, Chinese restaurant, or Nepali restaurant. So that means we are having multiple decision maker in our family. So in this particular case, how we are going to proceed, which decision we are going to take as a final decision. So in order to reach to a final decision, these consensus plays an important role. Now, what is the meaning of consensus? Consensus means resolving the conflict and reaching to a common agreement or a common judgment, basically. Okay. So now, in this case, because consensus helps in reaching to a common agreement, basically. So there are some realistic example of the consensus algorithm. Let me give you some kind of realistic applications of consensus algorithm where people have already used the concept of consensus algorithm. Like if I take an example, like in Kathmandu airport, multiple flights are heading towards Kathmandu airport. Okay, I'm just considering a scenario, not this pandemic scenario. In a normal circumstances, multiple flights are heading towards Kathmandu airport. And now the air traffic control sitting at the Kathmandu airport, they have to decide that which flight they have is to be landed first, which flight is to be landed second, which flight is to be landed third. I am not taking the financial aspects into this discussion, because otherwise the things are entirely different. Because home flights like Air India is to be given more priority as compared to the other. If this is the case, I am not considering that case. I am considering from the technological perspective. So now multiple flights are heading towards Kathmandu airport, and now the air traffic control system of sitting at the Kathmandu airport, they have to coordinate the positions of all the flights among themselves, and according to that they have to decide that which flight is to be landed first, and then second, then third. So this type of problem we can call it as a flight control system basically. So in the flight control system, they have taken or they have used the consensus algorithm in order to resolve the conflict and reaching to a common agreement. Second application, the fund transferring system, like in the case of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, consensus plays a very important role when it comes to transferring the Bitcoin from sender to the receiver. And a very renowned application is the leader election or the mutual exclusion problem, where all the nodes are collectively decide their leader. It is just like that for a particular constituency, multiple leaders are contesting for a single assembly election for a single seat. Now, depending upon the majority of the vote share procedure, the election commission will decide that whosoever will attain the highest vote or achieve the highest vote, then that particular candidate is to be declared as a winning candidate. So these are some of the realistic applications where these consensus have already played a very crucial role. I have selected only few applications. If you just Google it, the applications of consensus, then you will find long list of applications of consensus, and people have invented their own consensus mechanism depending upon their requirement, depending upon the applications. Now moving further, uh, so before discussing about the first consensus protocol that is to be used in the permission-less environment. So I'm going to discuss about in the next few PPT the consensus protocol that are to be applicable only for the permission-less environment. If my environment is public environment where anyone can join the network at any instant of time. So first consensus protocol that is to be applicable in the permission-less environment, if my environment is public environment, is the proof of work, or which we can also call it as a POW. So this protocol or this consensus protocol was invented by the Satoshi Nakamoto. So that's the way, if you refer the literature, this protocol also called as the Nakamoto consensus. So what is the basic idea of proof of work? Forget about what is mentioned in the PPT. I will tell you in a very simple way. So what exactly the meaning of proof of work? So in case of proof of work, the mining is dependent on the amount of resources available to the miner. I again repeat, the proof of work, in case of proof of work, we have to start the mining procedure. So in case of proof of work, the mining procedure is dependent on the amount of computing resources or the infrastructure available to the miner. So for example, if the miner is having high performance computing devices like GPUs or or some kind of high performance computing devices, then the chances that their transactions are added into the blockchain in round number one of the mining is more. In the round number two, again, their chances that their transactions are added into the blockchain is more. So this will give a kind of a discouragement over a period of time to all the miners, that why to take part in the mining procedure using the proof of work if your mining algorithm will only take care the computational resources available to the miner. So it is just like that, the group of users, those are having high performance computing devices, in every round of mining, their transactions are added into the blockchain fastly or accurately. Then for what purpose the other miner will take part in the mining procedure? So over a period of time, this will give a kind of a discouragement to all the miners that we do not want to take part in the mining procedure, because we have already wasted our memory, our utilization, then, and our transactions are not added into the blockchain, and this is a specific group that their transactions are added into the blockchain. This will create a kind of a problem in the proof of work based system. That problem we can call it as a monopoly problem. And over a period of time, this monopoly is a very bad problem. I can say this is a hurdle for the entire performance of the network, because it gives a dissatisfaction among the miners to take part in the mining procedure. Okay, so that's the way this reward concept comes into the picture, that irrespective whether your transactions are added into the blockchain or not, but the network will give you some kind of reward because you have taken part in the mining procedure. So that will boost up, that will give a kind of a motivation to all the miner to take part in the mining procedure. Now I come back to this PPT that the initial default setup time in the proof of work you have to set approximately 10 minutes is the default setup time. So initially the probability of getting the proof of work is low. Why? Because we don't know that who will be the winner of the round one of the mining procedure. It is very difficult to predict that who will be the miner of the round number one winning miner for a round number one, because all these things are dependent on the computing resources available to the miner. So whatever I have told you, all these things are mentioned here. So now these are the problems that we have discussed. This is a first problem associated with the proof of work based system, because in case of proof of work, I have already told you that it depends on the computing resources available to the miner. So miner having the less computing resources, that their probability to add their transaction into the blockchain is very less, basically. Okay. So this will give a kind of a discouragement to the miner if this monopoly problem persists, basically. Second problem is the associated with the proof of work based system is the power consumption problem. So what is the meaning of power consumption? Power consumption means that while for using the proof of work based system in the public blockchain based setup, because in case of proof of work based system, we are consuming the physical resources. We are not consuming the virtual resources. We are consuming the physical resources in terms of CPU, in terms of memory utilization. So that's the way this proof of work second problem associated with the proof of work based system is the power consumption problem. Okay, so they are basically power consumption is the another problem, and monopoly is the first problem associated with the proof of work based system. Now how we are going to rectify or solve this monopoly problem which is there in the proof of work based system? So in order to solve this monopoly problem, which was there in the proof of work based system, there is a separate class of consensus protocol that we can call it as a proof of stake based system. So POS is a next class of consensus protocol under the umbrella of the public blockchain, or if my setup is the permissionless setup. So if you need to compare it, basically, so in case of proof of work, the mining is dependent on the computing resources available to the miner. But in case of proof of stake, it is not the case. But in case of proof of stake, the mining is dependent on the amount of Bitcoin available to the miner. So it is just like that, whatever amount of Bitcoin I am having, according to that, I can take part in the mining procedure. So it is just like that. If I take an example, if I am holding 1% of the Bitcoin, that then I can mine only 1% of the proof of stake blocks. So if this is the case, then I can break the monopoly problem, because if certain group of user is having high performance computing devices or GPUs available, then their probability that their transactions are added into the blockchain is solely dependent on the amount of Bitcoin that they are having. If they are having large number of Bitcoin, then their transactions are added more. So depending upon the amount of Bitcoin which the miner will hold, we can start the mining process in case of the proof of stake based system. So now how the proof of stake based system works, like if we take about in terms of the, we talk about in terms of the attack. So executing an attack is also expensive in proof of stake based system, because if the attacker want to attack in a proof of stake based system, then attacker has to invest more Bitcoin. Why? Because the ultimate objective or the technology or the terminology that we are going to use in the proof of stake is the amount of Bitcoin. So if attacker want to capture, then attacker has to invest large amount of Bitcoin. So it reduces the incentive for attacker, basically. Why? Because the attacker need to own majority of Bitcoin if the attacker want to attack for a particular proof of stake based system. Okay. So now moving further, next class of consensus protocol is the proof of burn. So what is there in the proof of burn? So in case of proof of burn, it is not like that. In case of proof of stake, whatever amount of Bitcoin you are having, now the proof of burn is one more step it takes, that how much amount of Bitcoin you have burned. Burn means what? How much amount of Bitcoin you have spent basically. So it is just expensive as proof of work, because in case of proof of burn, you are not consuming the external resources, but here you are consuming the virtual resources basically in terms of the Bitcoin in case of proof of burn. And this proof of burn is also power efficient. Why it is power efficient? Because you are not utilizing the physical hardware to do work like in the case of proof of work, but here you are spending the digital currencies for the same. That's the way we can say that proof of burn based system is more power efficient. Okay, so now if I need to compare all these three very important consensus protocol that is to be applied in the permission less environment, if my environment is public environment, proof of work, proof of stake, and proof of burn. So in case of proof of work, I will tell you again, the mining is dependent on the amount of computing resources available to the miner. In case of proof of stake, mining is dependent on the amount of Bitcoin the miner will hold. And in case of proof of burn, the mining is dependent on the amount of Bitcoin the miner has spent. Okay. So these are other comparisons that we have already discussed. And the last class of consensus protocol before discussing about the implementation is the proof of elapsed time. So this proof of elapsed time, which we can also call it as a POET, is a last consensus protocol under the umbrella of the permissionless environment or public blockchain, which was coined by the Intel as a part of their Intel blockchain environment, which we can also call it as a Hyperledger Sawtooth, and which is a kind of a blockchain based platform which is to be used for development of the decentralized applications. If you want to develop the decentralized application, then for that particular purpose people are using the POET based consensus protocol. So what is the basic idea of POET? The basic idea is very simple, that every individual user have to wait for some random amount of time, and whosoever will wait first, that this random amount of time that their transactions are added into the blockchain is first. So I again repeat, the basic idea of POET is very simple. Every individual participant has to wait for some random amount of time, let's say for 120 seconds, and whosoever will complete this random amount of time first, that will be the leader for this particular round, and he or she has to decide that which transaction is to be added into the existing blockchain. But this particular way of representing is having some kind of problem. What are those problem? Problem number one, let's say two persons simultaneously claim that, hey, I have waited, let's say for 120 seconds, and you have also waited, let's say for 120 seconds. If two persons simultaneously at the same time can claim that we have waited for, let's say, same amount of time, then how your network can visualize that who is telling a lie and who is telling a truth? Okay, so this is the problem associated with the proof of elapsed time based system. How will one verify that the proposer has really waited for random amount of time? Because once the Intel was proposed this particular consensus protocol under their blockchain program, then they have come up with a software controlled environment only. But if it is a software controlled environment, then there is a scope for the attacker to enter into the system and make some kind of changes to the software and claim that, hey, I have waited, let's say for 120 seconds, you are telling a lie, I am telling a truth. Okay, so Intel feels that this is not the right way of handling the entire transactions. So then Intel come up with a kind of a hardware instruction set, which they can call it as a SGX environment, which is a trusted execution platform basically, which is hardware control, not the software control. If it is a hardware control, then there is a less chances for the attacker to gain the access. But although there are a couple of chances, but if compared to the software environment, the chances are reduced. So in nutshell, I will tell you, if this POET is going to be worked well for both the permission environment as well as for the permission-less environment. That means for the both the public and private environment. But proof of work, proof of stake, proof of burn, primarily we are using these consensus protocol for the permission-less environment when my environment is public environment. So this is about the consensus protocol. Before jumping to the implementation part, let me spare only 2 to 3 minutes on this particular slide. This is very important slide for all of you, because recently the government of India has released vision document from Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, that as a nation, what is the potential blockchain application of national interest, where government has identified these applications which can be a grayscale area for all of you to work. Like it is not only because public this is the normal perception among the public that blockchain is only applicable for the financial institution. No, it is not like that. When this concept was incepted in the year of 2015, then this was incepted with a perspective of financial institution. But nowadays, if you just Google it, you will find lots of use cases of the blockchain, not only restricted to financial, but for all the verticals of Industry 4.0, start from the transfer of land record, digital certificates. If you take an example of Estonia, is a very small country. Like in Estonia, everything is digitized. Like when they advertise for any particular post, then candidate need not to carry any kind of document. They need to carry only the tell the number, SSN number, and through that SSN number, employer can see, can download or can see with a restricted right what kind of social profile you are having, what kind of credentials you have earned. Need not to do any kind of Xerox kind of business. No use to need to send any kind of Xerox set of documents. So government is also thinking in this direction. E-notary services, duty supply chain, electronic healthcare record management system. So these are certain applications which is also a very grayscale area for all of you to work and frame out a use case for the adoption of blockchain. Now I am just opening the implementation part, and let me just open some Visual Studio Code, and then we will start the implementation. So in the implementation, maybe next 20 to 30 minutes, we are going to discuss about two implementation, how you are going to create the blockchain and how you are going to create the proof of work basically. Okay, so two part we are going to discuss, two implementation. And in these two implementation, how the hash validation works and how the reward is distributed, that part also we are going to discuss. So let me open the interface of the Visual Studio. It will take another few seconds. Yes, let me just. Yeah. So in this particular implementation, what is the prerequisite? You need to, in your laptop or in your desktop, you must have the Visual Studio. And after that, you must have the Node.js. So this implementation we are doing in the Node.js, how to implement the blockchain. But believe me, this is not only one way of implementing or creating the blockchain. There are thousands of ways of implementing the blockchain. Where some students have used the Java or Python or some kind of visual interface. So after that, we are also going to discuss the visual interface of the blockchain, that how the blockchain looks like and what is there inside the blockchain, because I believe that implementation is very important in the blockchain, because theoretically you are gaining the knowledge, a lot of stuff is available, but implementing the idea is very, very important. That will give you a kind of a confidence that you know the concept theoretically, and you have also implemented it. So in this particular implementation, like in your normal C program, like if I want to use any of the mathematical function like sqrt, you have to include the header file like math.h. So similar to that, I have already told you that a blockchain is going to use the SHA-256. So I have to include it crypto.js SHA-256 file, because I'm going to use this SHA-256 cryptographic algorithm in order to generate the hash. After that, I have defined here the block class. So this block class contains basically what? It contains certain constructor like index, timestamp, data, and previous hash. What is the meaning of index? Index means what? Because I have already told you the structure of the blockchain is like that. Inside the blockchain, we are having multiple blocks, and inside the block, we are having multiple transactions. So now I am creating the block. So I need to define the class block. Okay, I need to then once I have defined the block, then what items I need to store inside the block. So first one is the index, second one is the timestamp, third one is the data, and fourth one is the previous as. So what is the meaning of index? This index indicate the number of the block, basically block number 1, block number 2, block number 4. Timestamp indicate what? It indicate the associated attributes with the block. And the data indicate what? Data indicate what kind of transactions or what kind of data you want to store inside the block. And this previous has indicate what? This previous has indicate that, because I have already told you that this blockchain is using the concept of data structure. So the hierarchy is like that. We are having multiple blocks in the chain. So if we are having multiple blocks, then how these blocks are connected with each other? So these multiple blocks are connected with each other by using the concept of the linked list, because every next block is trying to store the hash of the previous block. So that's the way all these blocks are connected with each other. Okay. Now, once I have defined the class, all the attributes associated with the class, now I am going to calculate the hash. So now we will be using SHA-256 cryptographic algorithm to generate the hash of this particular block. So whatever attributes I have specified here, like index, timestamp, data, previous hash. So all these against all these attributes, I am going to create the SHA-256. Now, once I have defined the block class, then I am going to define the another class, that is the blockchain basically. So the first block of the blockchain we need to create manually. So first block of the blockchain we need to create manually, and that first block of the blockchain we can call it as a Genesis block basically. Okay, so Genesis block indicate the starting of the blockchain, and because it is the starting of the blockchain and it is the first block of the blockchain, or sometimes we can also call it as a zeroth block of the blockchain. So that's the way it doesn't contain any kind of previous hash. So instead of previous hash, in this particular case, in previous hash we are having null value, because we are not having any block prior to this Genesis block. So now we need to create the Genesis block here. So whatever attribute I want to assign to the Genesis block, because I have already defined this zero indicate what? Index value 0. This is the timestamp, and this one is the message that, or the data that I want to store inside the Genesis block. So this is a Genesis block, and in place of the basically if you compare it here, we have defined it previous as. So in place of previous as, we are having null value 0 here. Why? Because it is the starting block of the blockchain. So that's the way the value here we have given 0. Now we need to get the latest block and add it into the blockchain. Now we have created the new block that we have created into the blockchain. And now we are going to create, because here we have defined the class block. Now in this particular implementation, I have created only 2 blocks. Now this is against your requirement, that if you require thousands of blocks, then you can create the thousands of blocks. Okay. So in this particular implementation, I have created only 2 blocks, block number 1 and block number 2. So this is the code how we are going to create 2 blocks, block number 1 and block 2. So under the umbrella of block number 1, we are having index 1. So that means it is the first block, and then the timestamp. Against the timestamp, we are having this, and against the data, we are having my balance 100 event, basically 100 item we are going to store inside this particular block 1, and 50 items we are going to store inside the block 2. Okay, I'm just considering some rough values in order to demonstrate you how it works. After that, we are going to create the blockchain, because we have already created the blockchain class. Now I am going to assign this blockchain class to the my blockchain. Okay, and then whatever blocks I have created in the previous step, now it is the time to add block number 1 and block number 2 to the existing blockchain, that is the my blockchain. So I have added these 2 blocks, the new blocks, block 1, block 2, into the existing blockchain. So this is the code, very simple code to implement the concept of blockchain. So if I open the interface for the output, then I need to open the terminal. Then after opening the terminal, I need to check what file, what is the name of file name I have given here. So I have given the file name here, create bc.js. So I need to write the command node create bc.js. So if I execute now, see it very carefully. We are going to compare it line by line also. Let me go back up also so that we will check it line by line. So this code executed perfectly, and one class is created, one chain is created, chain that contain what? That contains your index 0. Okay, so this is the timestamp Genesis block. So this is the outcome of the Genesis block. And if you see, once we have declared the Genesis block, then inside that we have stored these attributes. Okay, now compare the implementation. Index 0, then the timestamp is a variable basically. Then the data I have stored, this is the Genesis block, inside the data of the Genesis block. Then the previous hash, inside the previous hash, because it is the starting of the blockchain, so it doesn't contain any previous hash. That's the way we have the 0. Now, as by using SHA-256, we have created the hash of the Genesis block also. So we have created the hash of the Genesis block. So this is the hash of the Genesis block. Okay. Now block number 1 we have created. Now I directly jump to the block number 1 code. So what it indicate? Index 1, timestamp. This is variable. Then data, my balance with a variable 100 I need to store under this particular block 1, which contains index value 1. So this is the previous hash of what? Previous hash, because block number 1 with index 1 will store the previous hash of the block, previous hash for what? Genesis block. So if you compare it very carefully, what is the hash of the Genesis block generated from SHA-256? F29BE03. If you see under the block number 1, what is the previous hash? F29BE03. So your blockchain created successfully, and your next block will store the hash of the previous block. And this is the hash of the block number 1. Now let me check in the block number 2 whether the block number 2 store the previous hash of block number 1 right appropriately. So this process we can call it as a hash validation process basically. Okay, so 9F805, 9F805. So this is the implementation with respect to the how you are going to create the blockchain. Now I am just shifting to the second and last implementation before wind up this particular session. So in this particular implementation, we are going to check that how we are going to implement the proof of work, because in our lab we have already implemented more than 60 consensus protocol. We have already implemented in our research lab with our students under the umbrella of different use cases. And this is some of the other contribution, like how we are going to implement very basic one, how we are going to implement the proof of work. So some of the part is similar that I am going to skip. Remember when we have discussed about the proof of work, then we have discussed that the proof of work is dependent on the computing resources available to the miner. Okay, and now the proof of work is dependent on the difficulty level. Difficulty level means what? It is just like that if anyone want to, if all the users in your network is having some kind of transaction that way they want to add into the existing blockchain, so all the user will have to perform some, will have to solve some challenge which was posed by the network. So it is just like that whosoever will solve the challenge first, that their transactions are added into the blockchain first. So now the next question comes that you cannot make this challenge more complex. If you make this challenge more complex or this difficulty level more complex, then the computational resources of the miners are wasted unnecessary. Or if you make it more, not more complex, make it very simple, now this you will give a kind of a formal invitation to the attacker, hey, come and perform some malicious activity. My mining algorithm is not so much complex. So here is a trade-off. You cannot set the difficulty level used in the mining procedure neither more complex nor more simple. This is a research question basically, how you can set the difficulty level. So that I am going to tell you in the implementation also. So in this implementation, again, we have used the SHA-256 crypto.js file because we are using the SHA-256 in order to generate the hashes. So this is the same code that we have already used. We have defined the class block, or under this we have defined the various constructor like index, timestamp, data, and previous hash. And this is a new field that we have included in this particular block, nonce value, because ultimately we have to set the difficulty level. And then we have the same code here. In this particular code we need to generate the genesis block. Basically SHA-256 we are going to use for the generation of hash, the block that we have already created in the above code. And then this is a new code. We are going to set the difficulty level of our mining algorithm, and this is very, very important, because difficulty level round by round you have to increase, round by round you have to decrease. That depends upon the application. Okay, so in this particular case we have set the difficulty level 5. So let me change it here to, and then we will discuss that why I have changed from 5 to 2. Let me just save it. Okay, after that I have created the blockchain class that we have created in the previous step. Also we have created the genesis block that we have created manually. Then under the genesis block we have stored certain attributes, like it is the started block of the blockchain, and that message I want to store inside the blockchain. After that I need to add the new block, that is the same code. Now this code is different because here we are going to check the validity. We have started from the first block of the blockchain and moving up to the length of the blockchain, that how many blocks we are having. We have to start the for loop, and one by one we have to check that the blockchain that the hash created by the, or hash generated by using the SHA-256 is equal to the current block hash or not. So it is just like that. Under the umbrella of block by block we need to check that if the current block hash generated by the SHA-256 is not equal to the current block calculated hash, then you have to return false, because then you are violating the regulations of the blockchain. Second condition, we need to check if the current block of the previous hash is not equal to the previous block hash generated hash, then again you are violating the condition of the blockchain. Otherwise we are returning the true value. Okay, so rest code is same, because we have created again two block 1, block 2. Once we have created two block, then we are adding these two block into the blockchain. So now if I start the mining procedure, if I start the implementation of this particular code, now I need to start the implementation. File name is pow.js. So let me check. It gives it executed perfectly, and it gives what kind of message it gives. The first block creation started. So the mining for the first block started. So the new block was mined with this particular hash. So this is the hash of the first block, because in this particular proof of work mining we have used only two mining for the blocks, two blocks mining, block number 1 and block 2. So this is the block, basically the hash of the first block mine. This is the hash of the second block mine. Now these are the attributes that are there inside the blockchain. So that part we have already seen with the difficulty level 2. So now once I am going to increase the difficulty level, then if I am increasing the difficulty level of proof of work based mining algorithm or any of the mining algorithm, then the mining procedure will take more time to execute, because the miner have to invest more resources. Let me show to you. If I change the difficulty level, let's say for example, if I change the difficulty level from let's say from 2 to 5, because once we have fixed up 2, then it automatically executes. So let me fix it 5. Again go to the terminal and again try to execute it, pow.js. So let's see, it will take some time because you have increased the difficulty levels. The first block mining started. Okay, now after that the first block mined, and this is the hash of the first block. Now the second block mining started, and after that the second block mining will take time. Okay, so this is the way. And now let me check, let me show it to you. If I change this difficulty level to 2 again, now check it very carefully. Let me just execute it one more time, pow.js. Now see, it executes automatically. So this is the role of difficulty level. Okay, now I come back to my PPT before wind up my session, and then we will take some question answers. So in the next part, I'm going to discuss some of our contributions in the area of blockchain technology. So I advise all of you, please refer my Google Scholar and my Scopus account. And because with our UG, PG and PhD students, we have framed out a couple of good case study in the area of blockchain. Like this, these are very recent papers. I have not included all the papers. This was published in the year of June 2020, published in the transaction on emerging telecommunication and technology. So in this particular paper, which was published in JPDC, very recent paper of 2020, we have find out the adoption of the blockchain and AI for energy cloud management. If my application is energy cloud management, so I advise all of you, please refer this paper. This is a very exhaustive paper basically, where we have selected multiple applications of Industry 4.0 and highlighted the opportunities and challenges for adopting the blockchain in all these applications. So now I am not going to discuss all these. So now let me just conclude. Last word I want to say, if anything I have said it seems useful to you, I am happy. If not, don't worry, just forget all about it. So this was said by Honorable Dalai Lama, but slightly in my context, I have changed it. If anything I have said seems useful to you, I am happy. If not, don't worry. Soon all become necessity for all of us because of the rapid change in the technology where we cannot sit silently. Okay. So with these words, I again thank the organizers of this particular uh, basically the webinar, because all the way they have provided a kind of a flexibility to all the participants to join virtually and have a kind of a fundamental knowledge about the blockchain technology. So now we will take some questions from the audience. This is the end from my side, because I know it very well that covering the content of blockchain within a span of almost 2 hours or 1.5 hours is very difficult task for the speaker. But I have considered considered some fundamental part with some implementation, because because I taught this particular course in MTech in last year or this year also, and unfortunately we don't have any textbook available for this particular course. We have to learn by research papers. Okay, so no standard textbook as of now is available. Good standard textbook is available for blockchain technology, but lots of edited books are available. So now, once again, thanks to Dr. Sandeep and LBF for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts related to blockchain technology. Now I hand over to the organizer for taking some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tanwar. Thank you very much once again. And let's start some question answer round. We have a question from Sushil Singh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can take on.
Shall I take, or?
No, it is there. It is there in question answer section. Just click on that.
Let me check.
Yes.
Chat section. If you have any question, if tampering is not possible, does blockchain can be treated as a security layer in prevention of ransomware and encryption attack vector? So tampering of data, we can say like that 100% we cannot claim, or any blockchain developer cannot claim that tampering of data is not possible. There is always some scope available for the attacker, but increasing the layer of security, you are minimizing the chances of attack basically. So with the blockchain, the structure is like that. It's a kind of a basically 3-layer structure. We have a blockchain, and then inside that we are having block, and inside that we are having transaction. So nowadays people are doing that. They are having separate access control policies for entering the blockchain, separate access control policies for entering into the block, and separate access policies for accessing the transaction. So layer wise, if you talk about in terms of managing the security, then things becomes much more easy for you. Okay. Now let me take another question. Please tell about how smart tokens are being used for stop tampering. Yes, smart tokens are very much used in some realistic applications because let me just open one implementation to show you that how the smart tokens, because I forget to show to all of you. Let me check it. Yeah. So your question is related to tokens. So if you see, if you want to visualize, this is about the tokens. So where in this particular implementation, we are having 3 peers, okay, peer A, peer B, peer C, and all these peers are having five transactions. So this is the block ID, basically block index that we have seen in our implementation. This is the nonce value, and this is the previous hash. Why is it 0? Because it's a Genesis block, and this is the hash of the Genesis block. And if we start the mining procedure, then it will.
Sir, we are not able to see your screen.
Oh, just a minute. I have just a minute. I think now screen is visible.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the demo related to the token. So here we are having 3 peers, peer A, peer B, and peer C. So like as in our implementation, we have already discussed about it that just a minute. So as in our implementation also, we have noticed that we are having certain attributes associated with the block, like the block index. So this is the block index, then the nonce value, and then what kind of transaction we want to store inside the block. This is the Genesis block, so it contains null value, and this is the hash of the basically the Genesis block. And similarly, we are having other peer A, peer B, and peer C, and each peer in this particular demonstration having 5 blocks. Okay, all these blocks are connected by the way of this next block is going to store the previous hash. So now if you see the tokens, basically tokens plays a very important role here, because by using the tokenized mechanism, you can set the priority that will remove the chances of having any kind of basically the monopoly kind of problem. Okay, so let me stop share here and we will take another question. Sushil Kumar Singh, I have one question that RSU node used in the blockchain network as miner node. How we can authenticate and validate the smart vehicular data in the blockchain network, or what is the method? Can we use any consensus? Yes, if you refer the literature, many authors have already devised their own consensus protocol that is directly applicable in the vehicular network. Like in the vehicular network, structure is entirely different. What is the structure basically? Because vehicular network, in the vehicular network, mobility plays a very important role. So you have to consider the mobility while you are going to devise your own consensus mechanism. So whatever consensus mechanism we have discussed, like proof of work, proof of stake, proof of burn, or proof of last time, these are the standard consensus mechanism. They are the primary consensus mechanism. But if you want to build up consensus mechanism for your own application, then you have to take the idea of these standard consensus mechanism, and you have to develop your own consensus algorithm depending upon your requirement. You have to customize it, like you have to go with the multi Paxos, cheap Paxos, different variant of Paxos, Byzantine, practical Byzantine, or the Raft consensus protocol. So depending upon your requirement with respect to the application, you can go with the proof of authority or proof of different consensus mechanisms are proposed by the literature basically. Now please provide your feed. Okay, so I think I have covered most of the questions. So any other have any question that I need to take care? Otherwise the session is end from my side.
Yeah, any more question?
Any more question? If we have, we will take some questions. Otherwise this session is end from my side.
Yes. Audience, any more question? I hope everyone has filled the feedback form. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Sudeep Tanwar, for joining this session. I think the wonderful explanation with lots of examples, with practical implementations, so many things we have covered. I think our students are getting benefited from this. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you,
and we shall plan another lecture for advanced methods in coming time as per your availability?
Yes, Dr. Sandeep, we have framed one course, three courses basically related to blockchain, because
Okay.
covering the content in 1.5 hours, sometime undigestible, basically, sometime for
Yes,
the
yes.
yeah.
True.
So
True.
for we have framed out three courses, 15 hour, 25 hour, and 35 hour. So
Okay.
all these courses are having mixed mode. Basically, in one day, 2 hour, 1 hour theory session, 1 hour practical session, smart
Okay.
contract implementations, realistic applications implementation, all kind of consensus implementations, all kind of different variants of blockchain implementation, and the storage, because storage plays a very important role. So the IPFS based storage mechanism we have implemented in our research lab. So
Okay.
I advise all of you, please explore these possibilities also. If you have any options available at your institute where you have the flexibility to arrange these courses, which will give some kind of realistic feeling to the student, some kind of real hands-on basically, where we have
Yes.
three separate courses: 15-hour, 25-hour, and 35-hour courses. So we
Okay.
have one instructor from industry and one instructor from academia. So that's the way we
Okay.
manage this particular course.
Right, right, right. So we can have a discussion on this part.
Yeah,
No problem.
definitely, definitely,
Yeah, we will
definitely.
have a detailed discussion over our personal chats,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And
please.
we will see how we can materialize all these things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. My pleasure.
Yes, yes. So from the LBF fraternity, the management, students, and staff, is a formally, I would like to thank you, and we are really obliged that you accepted our invitation, and we are really we find lots of knowledge had been inputted in the mind of people, the attendees, and everyone. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again,
Yeah.
LBF, and to you that in this pandemic situation, you have put up lots of effort to arrange this pandemic, because knowledge dissemination is very, very important to
Yes, yes.
diversify the mind. Okay. Thank you very much once
True,
again.
true.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, all attendees. Thank you very much. Let us end now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.